Welcome back to The Chosen Life. I'm your host, The Chosen Lawyer, and he's back yet again. A man who wears many hats, including watch connoisseur and super doc, Mr. RJ Kama. RJ, welcome back to The Chosen Life.
How's it going? So,
Good, good. Everything is great. How are things in your world?
not bad, not bad. On the watch front, a little quiet, but usually happens around this time of year. Watches and Wonders coming up at the end of March, so usually the whole industry is a little quiet, and I try to avoid buying too much at this time of year because who knows what they're gonna release.
Well, I promise we'll get to watches. We always do. And before we get to those, what are we sipping on today?
Oh, right now, actually, this is the nothing overly fancy. This is the Rocks Tequila, the Terramana. But it says the Anejo, which is actually not bad. So as far as celebrity tequilas go, I think it's better than George Clooney's, much better price point. And the Anejos I'm just starting to get into a little bit more. I traditionally didn't think tequila really benefited from the aging process, but it does add different layers of flavor to it. And this one's pretty good because the agave flavor still breaks through, but the longer it's exposed to the barrel, the more you get some of those vanillins and some of the flavors from the oak. So this one's not bad.
Let's grab the bottle again. Let's see that one.
The Terramana,
Yes, please.
giving the Rock an
So,
extra
so
plug.
the guy
He could
needs the
use
coin. He's
yeah
he's got a whole football league. Come
he
on, the
needs
guy.
he needs it. Yeah.
Any idea when he launched that one? Because I never got invited to the party for some reason.
Yeah. Or invite lost in the mail.
Yeah, something like that.
But he's had it for a while. Apparently, who knows? He says it's from the same distillery as Clase Azul. So he says they use high quality Blue Weber agave, but who knows how much is marketing and how much is true.
Well, that's a perfect segue actually to our first topic because I had a whole agenda ready for watches, timepieces, and before we got everything started, we talked about the agenda you and I off air. And I need to know now because you dropped a little nugget, and I need to know now if it's fact or fiction or not. Because The Rock, obviously, getting his start in the world of professional wrestling,
Yeah.
WWE. I'm a bit of a wrestling nut, so to speak. I'm on my way as we're doing this taping. Uh, Monday Night Raw is going to be airing tonight, and then we got the Elimination Chamber coming up in Montreal. Lots of stuff happening in professional wrestling, but apparently you were a fan of wrestling. True or false?
Oh, very true. Very true.
Really?
Absolutely love it. And it's very funny because in like when I was a kid, absolutely, and I was the Hulk Hogan era.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Hulk Hogan rock and wrestling and those action figures that you bounce around, beat the hell out of, and the paint would rub off within a few days of owning them. and then um, and then when I got back into it, ironically, was medical school, and it was just was a perfect stress release around that time. And that was the Attitude Era. That was with when The Rock and the corporation and Degeneration X, and then the last the last little while, like the last 5 years or so, or even longer, we started to really get back into it again. And this was like the second coming of WWE and Roman Reigns. Like when we first got back into it was Roman Reigns' first WrestleMania before he headlined every WrestleMania. It was the Roman Reigns against Brock Lesnar for the first time, and yeah, it's funny because you enjoy it on different levels each time, and so the before it was the somewhat the stress release and goofiness about it, but now you just respect the performance and what it actually takes to do what these guys do. And after seeing a few house shows and seeing it live and realizing how much physicality it is, and those guys do that multiple nights a week. They're out there, putting their whole body into it, and so it's on every level. We appreciate it. We fell out of it in COVID because it wasn't the same watching it in an empty stadium.
With
And I
those
remember
with those
that.
with those faces, computer generated
Yeah,
faces.
yeah, it
Yeah,
wasn't. It made you realize how much the crowd added to the whole atmosphere.
absolutely.
But yeah, apparently they're back on track. We tried to get back in. We thought last year's Royal Rumble and WrestleMania was disappointing, and it felt like the roster was really thin. So we tried to get back in, but apparently now they're on track again.
So you've been out of the loop for about a couple years, then I would
Yeah,
say.
the first COVID WrestleMania lost us, and then it was tough to watch it in the empty stadiums. Interesting to see everything they tried when they had, like you said, the faces on the screens, or they had the backup roster cheering behind glass. It was great, and then yeah, and then just it was like every time it was Reigns against Lesnar. It was like they had no other wrestlers on the roster, or no one else they were willing to push, and it just got boring. You know, they took turns being heel and face, and yeah, it felt like they were running out of ideas.
Well, I got good news and bad news for you then, RJ. I guess as you're saying this, do you remember your last live event that you went to in wrestling?
Well, it was WrestleMania at the MetLife Stadium when Ronda Rousey, Charlotte Flair, and Becky Lynch were the main event,
The
and that was
triple,
spectacular. I don't
yes.
even remember who the men's main event was. I remember the match of the night was Daniel Bryan and Kobe or Kofi.
Kofi Kingston, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
that as far as wrestling match, that was the best
Mhm.
match of the night.
So now a lot has changed since then. So first of all, Vince McMahon stepped down at one point because he said, "Look, I know there's a bunch of allegations with me, so maybe it's best if I just go away." They handed the keys of the kingdom to Triple H. Triple H took over creative.
Yeah.
NXT rebounded overnight.
Mm.
Triple H brought back all the fired wrestlers, and
Ah.
it's been amazing since they're actually booking people properly, keeping storylines consistent. It's been nothing but short of incredible over the last, let's say, 8 or 9 months, thanks to Triple H,
Mm.
which has been great. Vince McMahon has since reappeared over the
Uh,
last couple of months or so because he said, I need to be involved because we're going to possibly be selling WWE.
oh, really?
So I should
Mm.
definitely be involved with that sale. So I'm going to come back onto the board. I'm going to fire a couple people or make them go away, bring back my own people onto the board. But don't worry, I'm not going to interfere in creative. I don't know if he has that kind of self control or not.
Mm.
And the hot rumor is that WWE will be sold to the Saudis because they pay top dollar to host Crown Jewel and their other events. So might as well just buy the whole enchilada.
Mm.
But there's other rumors that Peacock may buy them, Disney, or RJ's trying to put together a group and buy them as well. And he's playing coy, but he may very well be looking at it as well. We got two belts, right? We got the SmackDown belt and the Raw belt, if you call it the Heavyweight Championship belt and the Universal belt. Do you know who the champion is currently?
No, it's probably Brock Lesnar or Roman Reigns.
At 800 plus days, it is Roman Reigns. Correct. Roman
Mm.
Reigns is the head of the table. He's the tribal chief. He's got the bloodline going.
Mm.
So you've unfortunately missed the whole bloodline angle, which has been
Yeah.
fan freaking
Mm.
tastic. So I'll fill you in about 30 seconds. So you got the Usos, and
Yeah.
you got Roman, all family. Then Solo Sikoa, who was also part of the family. So you got all of them. Then you got the wise man. You got Paul Heyman advising them, right?
Mm.
There was a double cross with Brock Lesnar, and then there's a real double cross. He's back with Roman Reigns. Sami Zayn appears. You remember Sami Zayn?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Sami Zayn wants to be part of the family. He became the honorary use. He's done everything possible to become part of the honorary use. Jey Uso never trusted him and kept
Mm.
trying to get rid of him. But he proved himself. And so now Sami Zayn is very close to becoming an actuary member of the Usos.
Mm.
But unfortunately, things fell apart because Kevin Owens kept interfering in this, his lifelong friend. And Roman Reigns was very irritated. So until Kevin Owens gets gotten rid of, we cannot have Sami Zayn part of the bloodline officially. All came to be at the last pay-per-view at the Royal Rumble. Oh, we lost you for a
Oh,
second.
yeah, there we go.
Back.
Yeah.
So it all came to be, and Roman Reigns successfully beat Kevin Owens and then beat him to a pulp with a chair, asked Sami Zayn to do the same. And when Roman Reigns wasn't looking, Sami Zayn hit him in the back of the in the back with a chair, so double crossing the bloodline. Jey Uso, in frustration, left the ring, did not assist Roman Reigns. So now we're in disarray. We are coming into the Elimination Chamber. Sami Zayn versus Roman Reigns. But the bloodline is almost broken up because Jey is with them, but isn't with them. And Sammy's apart now. And he says, I'm going to take the belts off you, Roman. But Roman has to face Cody Rhodes at WrestleMania because Cody Rhodes won the Rumble. So will Roman Reigns make it to 1,000 days? Will he make it to WrestleMania and face Cody Rhodes? We'll find out in Montreal this Saturday.
I'm glad they're giving Kevin Owens a push. He's one of the most entertaining wrestlers to watch. And I could never understand why, maybe that was Vince had his own bias or prejudice, but why they wouldn't give Owens the push. I mean, when he first came on and had those matches with John Cena, those are some of the best wrestling matches that I've ever seen. And then they just kind of gave up on him. He tore his ACL or something, and then never came back.
Vince McMahon and Triple H agreed with you because there were rumors that AEW was sniffing around him. They signed him to a long-term deal, I believe $3 million per year. And then Kevin Owens got his push, so Kevin is good. But there's been no word from Kevin Owens since he got destroyed at Royal Rumble, really. So the question is, will he come and interfere, be a part of that match, and help Sami Zayn win the belts? Time will tell. So storylines have been great. Bloodline's been great. Get on it immediately. You are a lifelong fan, whether you want him or not. We all like the Hulk Hogan era. Then a lot of us left. Then we came back to Attitude Era, left again, got into WCW with the whole NWO and everything. Then WCW went away. AEW is actually, so you've never been into AEW whatsoever, I assume.
No, but I hear it's fantastic. That's where Jericho and Daniel Bryan went, and those guys? Or?
Absolutely. So Jericho has his newest faction. It's called the Jericho Appreciation Society, the JAS. You got to love it.
How old is Jericho now? He's got to be late 50s or so? Or?
Early 50s, I believe. I believe he's 52, 53.
That's it? Oh, wow.
I think so. But he's been doing this for a long time at a very young age. And he keeps reinventing himself. He's Le Champion. So he is doing it. When he comes out and they sing it and his theme song comes out, the fans are singing with him, even though they hate him. So he's a pure heel right now. I wouldn't call AEW fantastic. I would call it on par or a little above the minor league system there, the NXT. But if you go to watch the live WWE event and a live AEW event, they still got long ways to go. Last question for you before we go into actual watches, because that's actually our episode today. But wrestling is such a great topic. I have a very good friend / trainer / life caddy, life confident. He is now training to be a professional wrestler. It takes a long time in Toronto and surrounding areas to actually find wrestling schools or wrestling trainers, but located him. He's doing it out in Hamilton, which is amazing. And he's going to fulfill his dream of being a professional wrestler. And all goes well, I will be his manager, the chosen lawyer. So I get to be the heel manager that I always envisioned myself to be. People watch wrestling and they're saying, I really want to be Hulk Hogan, Andre the Giant. I wanted to be Jimmy Hart, Bobby Heenan. I had no interest in going in the ring. I just want to yell profanities and yell at the crowd. That was my my inkling. Given your physique and the time you put into the gym, did you ever have that inkling to go be a wrestler?
Well, for like brief moments, but then you see these guys and you see their physiques at the start when they first come on the scene, when they're not doing house shows 5 nights a week. And they're in amazing shape. And then after they catch on for a bit, you see how it's hard to maintain that doing the road life. So it's really tough. And then you see the guys, at least now, there was that brief period where the drugs were a big part. It was basically like bodybuilding shows.
There's the enhancing drugs, and then there's the recreational drugs.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So there's both sides. The anabolic steroid part of it there was that brief time where it was basically a bodybuilding show, like Big Papa Pump and some of those guys. Now it's kind of
freaks and peaks.
Yeah, a lot of synthol injections and site injections. I don't know, but those guys could barely wrestle. Now it's coming down a bit, but I always found it entertaining when you saw the young guys on the scene whose bodies were so tight and sharp, and then after they caught on and were on the main roster, you saw how soft they could get in a hurry. So it's tough to maintain. So it'd
Yes.
be tough to live that life. I don't know. It would be a tough gig.
It'd also be a little bit of a pay downgrade, I would imagine. So, and you take a lot of bumps and bruises.
Well, yeah, that's why the other drugs, the other part of the drugs is such a problem. And that's not just wrestling. Like we watched the Super Bowl yesterday, and it's no question how some of those guys end up addicted to Percocets and morphine and painkillers. I mean, there's no way you can take those kinds of hits and not suffer from it, and then go back and do it again a couple of nights later. It's and when you see the live show, you really appreciate how real the bumps are. You know, it's they're not punching each other, but you're still falling from the top. You're still landing on hard surface. And yeah, it's wild.
Even when you fall off the top of a cage onto a table. Now the tape, the pit. Now, granted, the table is kind of paper mache, but not really. It's still a
Yeah,
table,
yeah, yeah,
but it's gonna hurt. Sorry, it's
yeah,
gonna hurt. It's inevitably gonna hurt. When somebody smacks you with that chair, even if they hit you in the strategic area, yes, they're not hitting you on your head. They're finding a way, but guess what? It's still gonna freaking hurt. I agree with
yeah,
you. The natural progression I've always seen is, the guys start off with the brief shorts, then they go to the boxer ones, then they go to full leg tights,
yeah,
then they got the tank top, then they got the t-shirt, and it's what I call, like, remember Macho Man Randy Savage, right?
yeah,
By the end of it, he's in a full poo suit. Like, it's literally like, like the only skin you're seeing of the guy is his hands, basically, and his
yeah.
neck, right? You know why? Because it's just impossible. Like Chris Jericho, he got a lot of abuse actually at his age. He wears the tights, the full leg tights,
Uh-huh.
but he goes shirtless. And
Mm,
his chest isn't what it used to be.
yeah,
And you know what? At 52 years old, yeah, you're not going to
it's
have that perfect six pack,
mm,
and you're not going to be
yeah,
able to have, you're going to get moobs and dad bodies and all that stuff. But
yeah,
he's making it work. And that's the other thing I noticed. Like, we talk a lot about this in the wrestling community. Guys, the first thing they lose is their chest. And the
mm,
theory goes, how they do those chops, those horrible
yeah,
chops, and they exchange
mm,
chops every match?
yeah, yeah,
Is the chops is what's causing them to lose their chest because they're hitting them so hard, losing the circulation. That's
mm.
what Kofi Kingston claims, that he has no chest anymore because of the chops.
I don't know. I don't think that really works physiologically. I mean, traditionally, upper body mass will go as testosterone levels start to dip. Now, you'd think that these guys are doing exogenous testosterone and androgens and anabolic steroids, but not all of them. And testosterone itself, as a single unit, generally won't be enough. Plus, you still need to be able to train it and stimulate it, and that's a struggle for a lot of these guys when you're doing so many house shows. Getting to the gym to actually do a workout is lower on the priority score. And so that's why when you looked at some of the guys who are really more into the physique part of things or more of that healthy obsession like Triple H and whatnot, who could maintain even when he was on the main roster, even would say that his first step was to go to whatever local gym there was, or he would already in advance scope out where the gyms were and make that part of his schedule as he landed. Whereas some of those other guys will just play it by ear or think about where they're going after the show. So
Well, Triple H, a little known unknown fact about him for people that don't know Dig is he actually kept clean, did not use drugs, did not drink. He was always a designated driver, never smoked, and he always stayed on the straight and narrow. And he ends up being the husband of the boss's daughter and social climbing. And he did very well for himself, did he? But part of the reason why he kept his head in the game
yeah,
at all time. That's why they called him the game.
yeah.
And any wrestler watching this right now, I'm going to tell you, RJ would be an envy because, again, you're wearing now a sweater, long sleeve, and you're still looking jacked. Okay. Like I'm wearing a short sleeve now, and people asking, like, you're not 20 years old, obviously, but, you're still very young. How do you keep the physique, having a full time career, business, traveling? Like, what is your secret? How do you maintain it?
Well, I think it's like Triple H. It just has to be part of your daily schedule, where it's whatever you're planning your day. That's part of the priorities that go in there. And then now, later 40s, it's the calorie restriction, which is really hard because there's just natural decline in the metabolic rate every decade. Starting in your 30s, it's about 5 to 8% decline, and so the amount of calorie restriction just needs to be that much greater. So in the summers, I've taken to fasting 24 hours just to try to keep the calories in check. And yeah, it's amazing. It's remarkable how little you actually need to consume. When you think about the human body, the human system, we've evolved over thousands of years to go long periods of time without eating. We've never had the chance to adapt to 3 meals a day and snacks in between. We're never meant to be in a postprandial state all the time. And so a lot of the advice that's out there around diet comes from people selling food. And so this is where a lot of the mixed messages are, is even if you go to the Canada Food Guide, it's horrible. And the meta message there is to eat more. And again, you can see who's motivated to promote the Canada Food Guide and where it comes from is because the message is, oh, eat more whole grains, eat more lean beef, eat more dairy products. But ultimately, if you eat more of anything, you're going to be storing it as fat. So the messages are all special interest motivated. So what I found is that the single most important thing has been aggressive calorie restriction, and it's amazing how little you actually need. So,
And together with calorie restriction and diet, out of curiosity, like on a typical week, what is your routine as far as physical activity go? Like what is your go-to activities and how many times per week would you say?
well, it's weightlifting.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a basic split. I mean, I do biceps, triceps together, chest and legs as their own days, and then back I do with deltoids.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll do that 4 days a week. The other days I do a low impact incline walk. So the days of jogging, long since done. It's just terrible on the joints too. So it's more low impact, progressive or steady rate. So you set the incline for 12. You go at about three kilometers an hour and do that for a half hour, 45 minutes a day, and then the rest is just mobility at work and activity throughout the day. So the thing with the physical activity, it actually contributes very little to caloric expenditure. Primarily, the amount of calories you burn comes down to thermogenesis and body functions, and that's all determined by the midbrain. So that's where all has to do with how in tune the midbrain is with the energy status and the balance of the system. So that's where when we treat the weight loss, it's those patients with abnormal incretin or insulin signals. They have a starving brain phenomenon, and some of those patients who are trying to restrict calories, it's tough because their body has found ways to function on very minimal caloric intake. And so this whole 2,000 calorie a day idea is far too much for most people. And for them, even if they restrict calories, they often lose muscle because that hormonal environment is
Right.
not what it needs to be for fat loss. So there's a lot of complexities to it. That's why it's become more of a subspecialty at our clinic as far as weight loss goes.
Well, it looks like you're practicing what you preach, certainly.
And it supports our habits. We
Now,
we
now,
ignore alcohol calories. Well, that's that's an X factor.
well, we have a few
No,
things
you
that
actually can't ignore it. So the interesting thing with
yes,
alcohol calories,
sure,
seven calories per gram, but it's not a traditional calorie. I mean, basically, the calorie has to do with energy given off when you burn it in a specific device. But the alcohol is more seen as a toxin by the body. So the thing is, the liver preferentially and primarily will metabolize out the alcohol. Anything you consume in excess can potentially be stored, but alcohol calories you can't store as fat. So it all has to do with the total consumption, and then everyone has different rates of metabolism for alcohol. So you need to figure out how it affects you. And
so
sometimes it's a fair trade off after a brutal day at the clinic.
so maybe tequila calories over hamburger calories then.
Yeah, it might be why The Rock has never been able to fully lean out, but we'll
Well,
see.
he also eats quite a bit for sure.
Yeah, so that's another thing. I think he's overestimating how much his system actually needs.
Yeah.
But there's another guy who claims to be fully natural. I don't know if I can.
How is that humanly possible? The man has muscles on top of his muscles on top of his muscles. Like, look,
and and
it.
later in
Come
the
on,
game
come
too.
on.
I mean, because when you look at him even 10 years ago in his 40s, um, not nearly the same degree of muscle mass, and so that's where, like I said, declining testosterone levels have to factor in at some point. So I don't know. I don't know if anyone would think different of him if he came out and said, this is my regimen," but for whatever reason, he insists that he's all natural.
Yeah, and look, you look at Barry Bonds and what he did in baseball back in his day, you know, and
Yeah.
he used HGH cream or whatever. Like The Rock bathes in this stuff, you know. It's like 24/7, he's sitting in a pool of it while he's sleeping. He must. It's impossible to do
Yeah.
naturally what he's saying. I think it's impossible. But that being said, for anybody that's trying to use any kind of additives, it's still almost like impossible to get to his level and maintain it the way he is. So kudos
Oh
to
yeah.
him that he's
Oh yeah.
able. Yeah, I mean,
Oh, you
but
got to train. I'm sure he trains with that degree of intensity, but there's definitely a optimal hormonal milieu.
he's a guy that I put in the category with LeBron James. You know, LeBron James is the one that always sticks out to me because he says, you know, I spend over $1 million a year on my body. And that includes all my chefs, personal trainers,
Mm,
basketball coaches, chambers that he uses. And every little, from the second he wakes up to the time he goes to sleep, everything's been calculated for him to a T of every single thing he
mm,
does from what he eats to his activities. Guaranteed The Rock is the same way. Guaranteed he has a
yeah.
whole team that their whole life mission is to make The Rock look like that. And
Yeah.
that's what people have to understand also. For average Joe Schmoes, you're reading up on the internet, maybe you use one personal trainer.
Mm,
These guys have a huge advantage. Imagine spending over $1 million a year just on your body,
yeah.
but it's worth it.
But the tough part is no one else can do it for you. Like you
Oh,
can't. It can't be passive. Like no one could lift the weights for him. So he still has
yeah.
to go in there and do it. And he still has to stimulate the muscle. And that's the funny thing. People will always ask, well, what do you do for arms? Like, I do arm exercises. There's nothing fancy. The muscle, it has a limited range of motion. It has a limited function. You do its natural range against resistance. The key is doing it intense enough to cause some damage and then having the proper hormonal support for it to hypertrophy. So that's where everyone thinks there's a secret or a trick, but so there's not much. What do you do for chest? Well, I do chest exercises. There's like a handful, and then choose a few and do those, and then a few months later do the others. So there's no trick to it. It's all about the stimulation and then providing the proper nutrients and hormonal environment for it. But but yeah, those guys are amazing. The thing with The Rock, he's just brilliant on all levels because the way he was able to brand himself and he's been incredibly careful, better than most politicians, to never step out of line or say the wrong thing. So that part is that's been just masterful. The way he has managed to not only brand himself and put himself out there is to be liked by everyone. Generally, whenever anyone loves you, there's going to be a group who hates you. And I don't see too many people who really have too many problems with anything he's said or done. He's always just been open about what he's aiming to achieve and do. And he's never manages to offend anyone in the process.
Not that I think that he would ever want this job because it would be a serious downgrade for him and he does not need the BS involved with it. But if The Rock wanted to run for president of the United States,
Oh yeah.
I think he could get it very easily. The way he speaks, he's very very intelligent, understanding in subject matters. But when I think about what happened to Trump at the end of the day and what his brand was worth before he became
Mm,
president, yet he wanted the honor and the prestige and whatever else he
mm,
did while he was president, sure. But you look at the end of the day, from the branding point of view of what Trump was, as far as the hotels and the clothing line and whatever else, it was done. There's no more
yeah.
prestige to that name anymore. The Rock, what if he does 2 terms, no matter how well he does, I think he's gonna have a harder time to be at the state he's in today. I think it's a serious downgrade. Like, why would he want this? Why would Oprah
Yeah.
want this? Why would George Clooney want it? They'd be excellent at his job, but the truth is that they'd look like a shell then because you have no choice but to muck and crap when you're
Mm,
president. I think.
yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. I think that much better off leaving that facade in place, and that's the showmanship. I mean, he knows that better than anyone. So he'll leave you wanting more, and that's the problem with going all in on something like that. Is that you're invariably gonna outstay your welcome. So I think he's way too smart to do anything like that.
Well, don't know if you're aware of this or not. I know it's the case with John Cena. Pretty sure it's with The Rock as well. When WWE makes you and
Mm,
brings you to the level that they do, when you go on to be a movie star, I know John Cena's for sure, and I'm pretty sure The Rock paid his dues with it. Every dollar that John Cena makes, I believe WWE gets 10% of it.
really?
Mm-hmm. Because his name is John Cena in real life, but they own the trademark to it. And
Ah, oh, wow.
but if you really think about it, then like he came and he said, "No, I happily pay this because guess what? I was some kid from Boston.
Yeah,
WWE doesn't bring me to who I am. I'm never making this money, so I'm happily paying the bill." So
yeah.
imagine every single thing John Cena does in
Wow.
his life, WWE automatically gets 10%.
Huh.
Pretty
Yeah,
good.
that's the brilliance of Vince McMahon. I think the only problem with Vince McMahon is his own ego that he insists on being the face of it still to this day. So I think absolutely brilliant. You can argue some of the ethics and some of the things he's done in the past, and I'm sure he's ruined some lives. But from a pure
Many,
business
many, many
perspective,
lives. Yes.
from pure business though, I mean, you can't fault the brilliance of the design. So he's just been, you know, from what it was to the empire it is now. That's all Vince.
I think though one thing that Vince, didn't leave for the right reason, so to speak, and way overstayed his welcome as far as hurting the product. No matter how strong you are in your given industry, no matter who you are, there's something about the art of knowing when to walk away. And if you have
Yeah.
to walk away a little too early, better than walking away too late. And I think if Vince had left a little earlier, I think he would have had a much better legacy because
Mm.
all people are going to remember is the crappy Vince McMahon at the end. And that's a shame. In sports, we talk about this all the time. Baseball, we talk about Andrew Jones,
Mm.
the baseball player should be in the Hall of Fame with his numbers, but because he overstayed his welcome, people remember the
Mm.
last 3, 4 dreadful years. They don't remember
Yeah.
the 16 other amazing
Mm.
years, and this is time and time again, not just in sports and business and everywhere else. And in business here, even now Vince coming back, I get that he's got to be a part of this if they're going to sell it because obviously,
Mm.
his interest in it. But if he starts messing with creative again, when they finally have been fixing it, it's going to be a real shame.
Yeah.
So segueing there to the world of watches, because it's funny, I'm thinking about 2023 and where we're at. And one of the things you were mentioning as far as supporting our habits, our toys, so to speak.
Yeah.
And you and I have quite a few things in common, turns out. Not just watches. Tequila's my drink of choice as
Mm.
well, and wrestling. And in watches going into 2023, where we were in the last couple of years, RJ, it's this really, really weird period right now in watches.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like the way it was in 2007, 2008 in real estate, when people were kind of saying, okay, I think the bubble's going to burst. I think there's going to be a whole
Yeah.
bunch of deals. It feels like nobody's really buying and nobody's really selling in the gray market. Like, it's like all those people that hoarded their watches thinking they're going to be able
Yeah.
to cash in, they can now not afford to sell for less than what they thought they're going to get. Buyers are waiting for those big deals. What is going on right now in watches and especially in the resale market as we are in early 2023? Where do you see things heading right now?
Well, it'll be interesting when the first domino falls. And right now, like you said, it's almost like a game of standoff because you're seeing not much selling. There was any Rolex that's less than completely desirable is a little bit less than list price that's actually moving. I think a Steel Explorer went for slightly under list plus tax on the forums not too long ago. All the two tones. So even some of the like the Steel Skydweller is now only a few thousand above list price. So what's going to happen soon enough? Because remember, Rolex makes 1 million watches a year. 3 years from now, that's another 3 million Rolexes out there, and the ones that are here now aren't going anywhere. So you're going to reach a point where supply starts to meet demand. Right now, I'm getting calls from Royal de Versailles, and I thought they lost my number. And there's like, oh, we happen to have a two-tone something. It's like, oh, that's great. I never asked for one. But they're starting to find that now they have to put some effort into moving some of these pieces. So those gray dealers who would normally take it along with a Pepsi and a more desirable model, the math isn't making sense for them because what they'll lose on this piece won't be offset by what they gain on the other. So those guys are turning down the models. Those fly by night flippers who would just take whatever they could get, knowing that they could just drive down to the local gray dealer and make an extra $500 or whatever it was. Those guys are out of the game now because the gray dealers aren't buying. They're sitting on too much stock as it is. So if they are buying, it's at a really reduced price so that they can at least make some kind of profit. So you're seeing all the watch as investment group start to leave the party. So it's leaving over the people who were in it from the start, people who actually loved watches and were buying them for themselves. So that watch as investment thing is starting to die off. The ones heavily invested in it are working hard to maintain a facade that there's still a lot of value and investment potential in the pieces. And there's a lot of behind the scenes working where they buy from each other or they post and then post for sale, then post sold, then the same watch pops up not too long afterwards. So there's a lot of games being played right now. But what most interesting is the retailers now starting to reach out as opposed to before having you beg them for the opportunity to buy even the crap that nobody wanted. I think that's and it's only getting started. Problem with some of these grays who built their stock on credit or with loans when credit and interest was very low. Now they've got to make those interest payments, so they can't afford to hold on for very much longer. So they're quietly selling in a very clandestine way at discounts and making the buyers promise never to reveal what they pay. So what you see on the forums compared to what they actually sell, or the asking price compared to the actual sale price, are going to be very different things.
That's exactly I had in my mind. I was gonna ask you because a lot of people, whether they're an actual gray market dealer or a wannabe collector, flipper, whatever, not everybody had the cash to front this stuff, and they went on credit cards, they went on lines of credit, secured or unsecured. And like you're saying, when the stuff isn't moving like in and out, in and out, and out, same thing happened in the sneaker game. And you're sitting on $100,000 of inventory, $50,000, 200,000, 500,000, whatever. When the stuff is constantly replenishing itself, you sell 10 pieces and you bring in your profit, and then you can buy 20 more and play this game. But when you all of a sudden, when you're left holding the bag and all of a sudden you have all this inventory and you're paying those lines of credit, you can't do that forever. You're going to have to pay it down. There's no choice. And that's where I think the domino is going to fall, is all those people sitting on those watches on credit.
Yeah,
They're going to have to dump them at some point. They're going to, for
yeah,
what they thought they were going to get $30,000 now, maybe they're going to get 25, like the
mm-hmm.
Batgirls, for example. You can get
Yeah,
Batgirl now 20, maybe even under in your sleep pretty
yeah.
much.
Well,
And
and that's the thing, and they're starting to show up more at the retailer,
mm-hmm.
and so you could get it for retail as well if you're willing to wait. So now, when the gray dealer existed previously to get you the discounts, and that was their main function. That's why you would go gray. So now, if you got a better price at the authorized dealer, and those are starting to happen again, like the date justs and some of these other models that you won't need to wait very long to get. No one's going to pay an inflated price when you can get it new from your dealer. So they're going to have to start to offer discounts again in order to steal business away from the authorized dealers. So why wouldn't you want a new watch fully stickered that no one else has worn and pay less for it?
And no headaches. That's the one I've always raised. DJ, they just, whether it's a 36 or a 41, as soon as anything starts to slow down a bit, those are the first ones you're gonna be able to get 1,010%. You always in the history of mankind have been able to get those.
Yeah,
And so I only see that getting more and more. And the one
yeah,
I found interesting, and inevitably when you talk about watches and watch collecting, it always comes back to Rolex. That's the way it is, folks, whether you like it or not. This is what people are asking for. This
yeah,
the odometer of where watches are going to go is going around Rolex. period. As long as Rolex kind of stays strong, watches are still strong. At the point
Yeah.
when you can start walking into any showroom and you start seeing inventory. Remember the days when you had inventory in the showroom, like in the glass cases, where instead of every
Yeah.
Rolex dealer it was just empty cases. Well, inventory starting to pop up here and there, like you said. Then that other watch companies are watching as well. In watch pricing, the in 2023, it was the two tones that went up in price. Did you find that
Yeah.
interesting?
Yeah.
Why is that?
Well, I think they're seeing where the profit margin is going to be, and they're trying to give some of it back to the retailer. So I think that's where they're seeing, and then potential to discount. I mean, as it was, I think Rolex's strategy was always going to be the the two tone, keep the steel somewhat scarce,
Yes.
and then if people had to buy the two tones, that was the higher profit margin. The minute things softened, they would be able to then offer more steel. So they would never have to lower the price. They would always just kind of upsell.
I was never a Daytona guy. Never
Yeah.
have been, never will be. Because I don't get the crown guards, honestly. Like when I had an Omega and I had a chrono, I like playing with the pushers. I like, it's fun, whatever. With when I had one Daytona, I'm never unscrewing the crown guards. It's just always gonna sit like that, never used
Yeah.
as a chronograph. So what's the point? Plus there's no
I'm the
date.
same. I've had several. And
Eh.
I've never unscrewed the crown guards. So the pushers, yeah, the pusher guards, never saw that purpose.
What's on the wrist today?
Oh, this is the Moser. So this is the perpetual calendar. But
Oh.
so that's the thing, the perpetual calendar, and this is an amazing watch. But here's another one whose retail was around 70, and you end up paying much less than half retail for it.
Is that
So
white or yellow gold?
it's red gold. It's red gold. Yeah. So this is the perpetual calendar, which is an amazing bit of watchmaking, actually. So that's why I absolutely love this piece. But and this is the thing, is for anyone to pay retail for something like that is kind of crazy in this day and age, because some models just don't retain, and it's kind of a shame, because this is actual watchmaking. I mean, perpetual calendar is such that at the end of this month it'll turn over on the 28th, so you only have to
Amazing.
set it once every 4 years, and it keeps track of the leap year on the back,
Oh, look at
so
that.
you won't be able to see
Yeah.
through that movement, but there's an indicator that lets you know which year it is in the cycle. And if it's a leap year, it'll go to the 29th on February and then flip over after that. So it keeps track of day, date, and time. And Moser makes about 1,200 watches a year. So compared to Rolex, that makes about 1 million watches a year, you've got something in very small production, something genuinely limited, as opposed to artificially scarce. And that's why the retail is what it is. But the secondary market is crazy. So you get a piece like this that's actual watchmaking horology in small batches, precious metal, and people are paying more for a steel Daytona. So that's where the hype and perception kind of separates from actual quality and intrinsic value.
That IWC, Glasuda, two brands I
Yeah.
love a lot. And if you buy them right, you buy them at the end of the depreciation scale, you can
Uh,
wear that thing for free practically, because
yeah.
you're
Yeah.
always gonna pull out your money. When you're buying a $20,000 watch for $9,000 or $8,000, it's kind of better than buying a $9,000 watch for $9,000. I mean, you're
Mm,
putting it all in respective dollars, I guess. But
yeah.
if you know you're always gonna pull out your money, then really aren't you renting it for free? It's kind of cool that way.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
explaining to a watch aficionado was one thing, but to the average Joe public, they're like, "Is that a Rolex?" That's all. It's so sad.
Yeah.
Gotta ask you, so now for the average person watching this that is in the hobby of any kind stage, do you feel right now is it time to buy, time to sell, or time to wait?
Well, it's always a time to buy, but it all depends on, what you're after, and what it's worth for you. I mean, it's still not the time to buy a steel Daytona or a Submariner, because the time will be a year from now, 6 months from now, when those are closer to their retail price. Same time, Rolex will raise prices twice a year. So if you bought a gray market price now, that might be what retail is in a year or two. So as long as it's close enough and that difference is worth it to you, if you're paying a couple thousand more than retail, if that will provide dividends in the joy of wearing over the course of the 2 years you would have other had to wait, then it's worth it. But there's so much great values out there and great watches. So right now is a really good time to buy, because as long as you're not buying Rolex, there's some brands that are so undervalued, and especially with the state of the market, you can really get some fantastic deals. You looked on the forums lately, there's some Omegas for less than 50 off, and less shoot IWC. For some reason, there's a lot of Panerai all of a sudden. But
They've been
if
lurking
you
around
buy
for a
right, those
while.
are,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like you said, if they've already taken their biggest hit, then even if you change your mind or want to sell out, you're not going to take a giant bath on it. Whereas if you paid full retail, it's a different story.
Absolutely. So now I got to ask you, compared to from our last episode when we had our taping with you,
Uh-huh.
is the Moser the newest watch? Is there any other
That's
additions?
no, well, yeah, no, because
Yeah.
this was there was a little bit of a frenzy because I got the Moser, and then shortly after I had the Grand Seiko, what they call the Rio Sundo. That's the they don't like you to call it the Tiffany blue dial, but it was a
It's the
Tiffany
Tiffany
blue
Blue Dial.
dial that was limited to the US market. They made only 300 of them. So I'd ordered that before, and it only became available in late November when I was in New York City for it. They went to a Grand Seiko event. They had it there, so I picked that up, even though it was it was from a while ago. And then they also revealed their limited edition for the Grand Seiko Club, which was again limited to 300. So I got that one too, and it was just after the Moser. So it was, it was an
You're
interesting conversation with the wife. But
you had a game plan. You said you had a game plan. Your game plan
mm,
was to consolidate, gonna get rid of a number of pieces and just get these bigger, higher priced ones and have less
yeah,
but more. How did that work out?
you know what? It's interesting because I did the whale hunting, and it worked out in theory, because now I've got some nice pieces, some halo pieces, impressive pieces, but the day to day joy of wearing has been stripped away. So now I'm starting to kind of pivot a little, because you've got all these special occasion pieces and only so many special occasions. So the day to day joy of wearing a piece and feeling liberated about where your wrist is going to be, that's gone, because now all these pieces, they're harder to replace. So you're much more careful with them, and you don't want to wear them there, or you can't wear them here. And so that carefree strap a Seamaster to your wrist and go to town is kind of lost. So now you're gonna have to build up that part of the collection again, because the joy of your day-to-day life with that watch on your wrist is somewhat been lost. And so it's nice to say you have these pieces, and times when you're out and you want to flex your wrist, or times when it is a special event, you want to have something special on your wrist. It's nice to have those, but most of your life is not those events. So it's interesting learning experience, because the collection is more impressive than it's ever been, but the enjoyment of it isn't nearly the same. So I like the enjoyment better than the than the ideal vision of what that masterpiece collection would be.
As
So
our
I'm sorry.
viewers are grabbing their boxes of Kleenex and sobbing deeply for RJ's struggles, as you just heard the definition, folks, of what's called a first world problem. I always think of that line from Glengarry Glen Ross when Alec Baldwin pulls off his president,
Yeah.
puts it down, looks at Jack Lemmon, says, "You see this watch? This is worth more than that car you drove in today." And that really stuck with me. And for people that do have timepieces that cost more than the average person's car, there's a psychology that you're wearing somebody's car on your
Yeah.
wrist, So I've always found that that's a huge hurdle to overcome. And especially when somebody is driving, let's say, a nice Mercedes SUV or BMW and all that, and you're still having a more expensive watch. Like, yeah,
Well,
good,
and
good,
that's
bro.
the and then people will tell you crap like, oh, you should wear. They're meant to be worn. You should just wear it hard. I would challenge any of them to put on a platinum Langa and go change the oil in their car. Not a single one of them would do it. But it's nice to have those watches that you feel comfortable doing that because it is a lot more liberating. So so now I'm
When
starting to look back to get some of those pieces on the wrist or the day-to-day beater, as we call them.
if you have a high priced pair of Jordans at $3,000, let's say, it's not that enjoyable to wear them and get them dirty and scuffed up.
Yeah.
Somebody who collects artwork, they don't wear that. When you have a fine wine collection, you generally don't drink it. You keep it in your cellar because it's part of
Yeah.
a collection.
Well,
So
that's the thing. You don't mix Macallan 18 with Coke. So it's I see it the same way. But that's the thing. So the consolidation happened, and there's some whales definitely in the collection now, and they're amazing pieces. And when you wear them, it adds to the moment because it's just one extra layer of ceremony and pomp and circumstance, and it helps create a better memory of the moment because those special occasions call for a special watch. But like I said, I didn't expect to miss the day to day. I don't want to say lower end, but the day to day wearable pieces as much as I do. So there's a lot to be said to having watches that you can actually wear and feel comfortable wearing, and ones that aren't as hard to replace if they were to get damaged or lost.
you'll be happy to know that my favorite piece still to wear to this day is my two-tone DeVille
Mm-hmm.
with the leather strap. And when I'm wearing it, I show people your Instagram account and say, "You see these pieces that he's got? This came from that collection once upon a time." So I feel like when your pieces, I feel like we have this connection. I'm almost there. So and I love
This
that
is
piece.
still the DeVille is such a great line for Omega. Omega is frustrating to see them be just the Speedmaster and James Bond brand
Yes.
because they're actually great watchmakers, and it's also a frustration of the industry and just the mindset of the average consumer these days because they would come up with something like that chrono chime, which is amazing watchmaking,
Yes.
but then they
Yes.
put it in a basic Speedmaster case,
Yes.
and it's all the talk for about 11 minutes. No, everyone's forgotten about it.
And how much was
So
it again? How much does it cost?
it was like over 150 or something
Something
Canadian.
it was something
Yeah,
crazy like that. Even like almost 200,000, I thought. But
yeah, it
when
might
I
have
first
even
saw,
been closer to two, but
I misread it. I was debating if I wanted to buy it for 20,000. And I'm like, oh, it's 200,000.
yeah,
Whoops. But even like take the DeVille, for example. If you go on Amiga's website and you go into the collection, do you know how many variations of the DeVille they have? Like,
yeah,
RJ, why? Why do we have to have 100 of every single model? Like, Rolex has their few and
yeah.
they're good. Why can Omega kind of streamline, cut out the excess, and keep it more consistent, like, and just with their few and do it well? I don't get it.
Well, it's because they have to answer to the shareholders and they have to move product, right? So they have to, they make 800,000 watches a year. They need to put them somewhere. And so for them, it's all about just pushing volume because for them, the sale is the minute their authorized dealer makes an order. So they don't care if it ends up on the end consumer or if it ends up on Joma's shop or if it ends up in a trash can. It's pretty much sold as far as they're concerned. They're starting to care more now because of the awareness and the perception of value being tied to the price. So this whole resale value thing is still a relatively new concept in the world of watches, the same way as it would be for cars. Because
Right.
before it was just accepted that you've got a depreciating asset and something that you're going to lose money on, and you'd hope to, at least not with a Rolex, the hope was at least you could get something for it. If you're in trouble, at least someone would give you something for it, as opposed to the other pieces that you might have to give away or, not really sell to return anything on. So now this whole idea of making money on your watches, or at least selling for a decent price after, it's kind of new. And also before, there wasn't many ways to sell it. You go to a pawn shop, sell it to your friends. Now the forums have made it really simple, and you don't even have to go to a gray dealer and let them lowball you.
Yeah.
Everyone's a seller to some degree, and all it takes is the ability to upload some photos. So it's a
Or if you're
different
really
world.
lazy, but you're part of the system, how many of us know these dealers where they'll sell it under consignment for us?
Yeah,
They'll take care
yeah.
of the pictures, they'll take
Ooh,
their 5, 10, 15%, and
yeah,
we do nothing. And hopefully they have a customer base that's way beyond ours, and we just collect their
yeah.
money, right?
No, yeah, absolutely.
I got to ask you then, looking ahead now, we're in 2023 and looking where
Mhm.
the future is going about some watch trends.
Yeah.
And the one that is really, really debated, has been for some time now, is big watch, small watch. Where do
It's,
you
it's gonna
see? Are
it's gonna come
we?
back to the small.
That's
Well, I shouldn't say small.
smallish,
30,
smaller.
36,
Yeah.
38, 40 is perfect. And I think more people are going to start to realize how perfect something like the 36 date just really is. And I think that people are getting caught up too much in the numbers, because a lot of it has to do with how a watch wears on your wrist, and
Mhm.
that more has to do with the dial size than anything else. So you look at when they changed the Explorer from 39 to 36, it was the same dial. They just changed some of the case shape, and it wears on the wrist identical. So the wrist presence is almost the same, despite this 3 millimeter difference. So when you get a piece like the Datejust with the fluted bezel that that shines and reflects light and sparkles, and it's a very thin bezel and relatively large or dial diameter, that's just a perfect wear. And I think that when people more are buying watches to wear them, they're going to come back to that realization that it's that perfect sweet spot. Because the thing with the 40 millimeter, like I have the day date that's 40, and I have the one that's 36. And the 40 is really more of a sport watch, and the 36 is more of a perfect shirt cuff suit, even more casual, because it still occupies enough space on the wrist. So unless you're a really big 6'5" WWE wrestler, you don't need those bigger watches. And so they might still always have those for that niche client for whom it's an appropriate size. But I think trend wise, I think the big watch is seen its peak.
Even with the day, the way you're bringing it up, your 36 is the platinum
Yeah,
with the ice blue dial.
yeah,
Okay, I
yeah.
remember. And then your 40 is the yellow gold with the
The yellow
tuxedo
gold.
dial.
Yeah, yeah. So
There
there's
she is.
and the thing is that they not that much different, but it's
No,
remarkable. And with the plan, the
this
smooth bezel, it makes a difference, but they wear very differently. Um, but I think the 36, for whatever reason, at some point they started to say it was a lady size, but I think it's a perfect sweet spot.
think how long, and I mentioned in a different episode before that if I had one watch to collect one model of one watch, it's a Datejust 36. That's the classic size. You can fit it
Yeah,
under anything. And the 40 day date being the yellow gold, that one with the yellow gold makes it look even more gargantuous, I think, versus if it was white gold.
yeah,
But
yeah. It's and I used to have the Date 8 which was even bigger, and that
it
had the
was really
thicker,
chunky.
fatter.
It was really
Yeah,
chunky. Yeah, the
and it was a
casing.
42 millimeter, and that was
Yeah.
part of the answer to the big watch craze. And the
Yes.
Rolex wanted to join in on the big watch craze, and the proportions were way off. So the 40 at least streamlined things a little bit, but I still think 36 is the perfect Goldilocks when it comes to that type of watch.
You know, I think woke up to this is where it was my read was IWC, and you see
Mm.
now where they're going with the pilots. and they're cutting down on the sizes of the pilots and the Portuguese and
Mm,
Portuguesers. That's where it seems to be going. But then they have to take functions out of there, so then you're not seeing the 7 day movement and the power reserve anymore. And to me, that's part of the whole love of a pilot.
yeah,
But the new popular ones are the smaller, thinner ones. But to do that, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't put all these functionalities and complications. I think
yeah.
there's a reason why the pilot was its size, and it's to get in that enormous power reserve.
Yeah, and you look at those watches though, they very thin bezels, and it's
Yep.
all dial. So when you get a watch like that that's all dial, it wears really really large.
Yes.
So it's like the so that's the Lange, that's only 42, but it's all dial. So it actually it's a monster on the wrist, and so it's
So it fits like a
proportions
44 or 45, I assume.
easily, yeah,
Yeah.
easily. And that's the thing is there's some much bigger watches I had, like even the Pro or some of the big diver Seikos. This wears larger than that because the like, something like that Seiko Big Diver 45 millimeters, or I think even 47, but the dial size isn't that large. So there's a large case, but visually it's all broken up. Whereas this is just all dial across, very thin bezel. So this wears more like a sport watch than a dress watch. You know, it's a Langa that's inherently more dressy.
I don't know about you. I got very much small wrists. No matter how big my forearms are, I still have the tiny wrists, but I like the big watches. I don't care, and I like the small watches. So I'll wear a 36 Datejust, or I'll wear the enormous big pilot, and I'm happy the same way. But you have to think about what shirt you're wearing, because you're wearing a dress shirt, you're wearing a giant big pilot.
Yeah,
It's not going under the cuff anytime
yeah,
soon. Those
yeah,
shirts are
yeah,
those watches are meant to be worn over the cuffs, which
yeah.
I found very hilarious. So prediction wise, every year I come and I make the joke, okay, this is the year that we're going to get a steel president. Ha ha ha.
Never, no, no. Although it will be interesting. I mean, I didn't think they would do the steel Skydweller, but I see why they had to. And now they've gone full on sport watch on the Skydweller, which really, when you look at those proportions, is really where it belongs. So when they made it steel, it really took off, and then when they put the oyster flex on the precious metal, it got another resurgence. So renewed love with the Skydweller, which I still love as a watch. I mean, no one appreciates the fact that you have a dual time zone annual calendar
Yes.
and the bezel turning mechanism to set the function. I think it's brilliant. So I love this Skydweller for what it is. I hate how 99% of the people wearing it probably have no idea how to even set the function.
I don't
But
even know if
it's
they know it exists, to be honest.
yeah,
So, but aside from, let's say, a Sky Dweller where they actually come up with a new complication, we've talked about this before as well. That most Rolex's changes is like the Malibu Stacy changes, where like Malibu Stacy has a hat
a
and like,
new
oh, I
hat.
need
Yeah,
the new hat. That's really what
yeah,
they're doing. Like, oh wow, look, it's now in a different color dial.
yeah,
Woo, I must have that.
yeah.
Are we ever gonna see, like they had it on the two doors with the Ranger? Are we gonna see a Rolex with a power reserve? Are we gonna be seeing clear case backs? Are we gonna see more complications? Like,
Well, they do that. Yeah, they do that with the Cellini models. They won't.
yes,
It'll be interesting. The whole titanium Sea Dweller was interesting. So Rolex isn't completely non-reactionary. I mean, that titanium Sea Dweller was a direct response to the Omega Ultra Deep because they went for the increased depth, and then Rolex had to respond. But also the whole titanium thing is that something that every brand is offering except for Rolex. So Rolex
right.
at least had to say on some level that they can do it too. They got into textured dials, which a lot of the industry now is getting into textured dials as response to Grand Seiko. The whole right left-handed GMT came completely out of nowhere. You wonder if that was a mistake that they were in too deep on, or what. But what will be interesting is that it's an anniversary for the Daytona, and so usually any anniversary they commemorate with the color green. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with the Daytona, how they commemorate the anniversary. I think Submariner too is coming up on an anniversary. So
Be interesting if the Hulk comes back, because they can always bring it back when they want to.
absolutely. I think it would be a little early. If they might do a black bezel with green dial or some other variation on it, I don't think they'd give us a direct Return of the Hulk. But I didn't think they would put the Pepsi in a steel case after making it exclusively white gold for the longest time.
A
So I
lot
thought
of
that was wild. And then the only differentiating factor was the Jubilee bracelet, and then they, they introduced the oyster on the steel. So you never know what Rolex is thinking. The nice thing about Rolex is that they don't have to answer to shareholders. So they're not as motivated in just pushing units and volume as they are in maintaining the reputation and the idea of Rolex. And they've invested far too much in that idea of Rolex being what it is to give up on it for a quick quarterly profit. Whereas Omega, any Richemont group, any of these brands that are part of the big conglomerate, you're only as good as your last quarter. So they would happily, and they did it. You saw them do it with the Dark Side of the Moon. So you see them do it with the Speedmaster, the Swatch, the Swatch watch, the Swatch Omega. So they're happily gonna sacrifice legacy for the next quarter in sales. That's going to be the biggest difference between the independent brands and the brands that are part of a big group or conglomerate. So Richemont and uh, LVMH and Swatch, any of those brands will always suffer compared to the independents because Audemars still somewhat the family is involved. Patek, Rolex. That's why they don't have to worry about the shareholders or the board of directors.
what are the odds that we see one day a sub with a red dial and red bezel?
I think they exist already from some of these aftermarket
Aftermarkets,
guys,
yes, but
but
I think
yeah, I don't think. Although the whole Oyster Perpetual thing was interesting,
right.
I don't think they would mess with their main bread and butter lines
Yeah,
because the whole appeal to some degree is like I was wearing my birth year date chest the other day. This is a watch that's almost 47 years old,
the black dial
and
one.
it looks a hell of a lot like the one that was made today, and that's part of the attraction is that it's still going to be relevant that many years later. You look at a giant Breitling for Bentley, that's not going to be relevant 20 years. It's not even relevant 10 years later. And so the timelessness of the design and the fact that they don't mess with it too much is part of that appeal of Rolex, that you know that your grandson or great grandson or whatever generations later wearing it, it's still going to be a relevant watch to wear, and it's still going to resemble the Rolexes that are made that day. I think it's brilliant, and the fact that they can play the long game is why I think they've been able to do it so well. Whereas these other brands, like there was a time when Omega was very close to Rolex in sales before things went crazy, but they couldn't play the long game. They couldn't sit back and let something simmer. And when they had some really hot models, they couldn't hold them back and let them simmer and make them halo pieces because they needed to sell units.
So they
So
keep
you
got
saw
it.
that.
They keep messing with the recipe. Keep messing with the recipe, even though you had a good recipe at some
Yeah,
point.
yeah.
Right. So as we're summing up today's episode, RJ, and you shared a lot of wisdom with us today. I mean, it looked like it was gonna be a whole episode of wrestling. We found our way to watches. It will be interesting to see where Rolex is going this year and what little things they come up with. But again, I think it'll be like a hat on Malibu Stacy. I don't see anything
I think
revolutionary
that would be
this
the
year either.
smartest. The smartest thing they could do
Yeah.
is next to nothing.
Yeah.
But we'll see. It's they're always surprising. But like I said, that GMT completely unexpected. I expected a traditional GMT with a green and black bezel, but to make it a
Left-handed.
Destro,
Yeah.
ugly watch, hideous. But you look at that when it first hit the resale, it was like 60,000 or something absolutely crazy, and now it's back down to like what average GMTs go for.
Good luck to them. So, for those existing and future watch connoisseurs, as they're looking to the future right now, for those that don't want to play the Rolex game, or it looks like a big, hill to climb one day to get one, regardless, even if they got onto a list. Any underrated watch brands out there, regardless of price point, that people may not be looking at, that for example, I find it very interesting Hermes with watches.
Oh yeah.
Like I'm actually blown away like how well they're doing with it. I'm getting
Uh,
like kind of tempted looking at them.
well, the only thing there, I'm just waiting for them to show up on the secondary.
Bingo.
But their world timer is amazing, absolutely amazing. What boggles my mind is their platinum is not that different in price from the titanium. So I'm
Right.
not sure what the metrics are of pricing there, but I absolutely love that watch. I just don't love it at retail. But yeah, Hermes has been amazing with watchmaking. Even Louis Vuitton has some interesting models
They have
that
a
are
nice
coming out of
chrono.
there.
I looked at the I was reading an article on it the other day, and yeah, they have some nice pieces.
Yeah, yeah, surprising. But I think never want to pronounce it. Gigi Lecoultre or Jaeger Lecoultre. I think they're amazing, especially on the secondary. Even at retail, not too bad. Like their Polaris at retail, the
Mhm.
green dial one is only I think about 12, and which is not unreasonable on on the secondary. That's going to be a fantastic watch to pick up at 30 points off. But Gigi, and again, that's a classic watchmaker, and they still make some very masculine, sporty watches if that's what you're looking for. And from a horology perspective, they just blow Rolex out of the water. I still have Grand Seiko, although they've gotten very aggressive with prices. Um, but that's where you start to see more of those show up on secondary at much better pricing.
Zenith Chronos still tend to be for watch collectors a nice piece to get. And they have some interesting models that have been out for a
Yeah,
while now.
well, now those have fallen back to earth.
Right,
Remember
right.
when those were selling at a premium because they
No
had
more.
vague
No.
resemblance to the Daytona,
Yeah.
and now those are at the proper discount. It was wild when people were trying to charge premium, or even the GP Laredo. They were selling at premium because they had some passing resemblance to the Nautilus or the Royal Oak. Now those have come down to earth. That's still an amazing watch.
Yes.
And GP Girard-Perregaux has a rich history in its contribution to watchmaking. It's just that's not a brand you ever pay above list for. So
A watch brand I've never asked you about, and now I'm curious as we're summing up today's episode because it's always on my head. It's like this guilty pleasure. I like the Heuer
yeah,
Monaco Monza
yeah,
with the different size with the squarish rectangularish
yeah.
casing. There's something about it that's kind of cool, but yet Heuer, I feel allergic trying on. Why?
Well, it's that's an iconic watch too, and I love them. I think the problem is that they were at a bit of a crossroads in identity, and then when they were
Yes.
trying to decide where to go, at some point in the game they tried to be all things to all people, and you just can't. You're going to go down a few levels and be the entry point and catch them on the way up, or you're going to be more of a halo piece and wait to catch them. They tried to do both,
Right.
and that's a thing. You can't have Macallan 18 on the menu at McDonald's, and so you can't have it both ways. So they went, and at some point they went down market, and I think a little too far down market, and they got into smartwatches and much less expensive watches, and then they put out a tourbillon for like 15,000, and then they kind of completely destroyed themselves as a brand identity, and that's a really hard segment, that $1,000 to $3,000 segment. So why even try to swim in those waters when you've got iconic pieces that you can demand more for? So I think that they diluted the brand, and the problem is the logo stayed the same. And there's a reason why Toyota does Lexus. There's the reason why these other brands change the logo, because there's a lot that goes into that value and that perception.
So
Uh,
why not get rid of the tag name, just call it Heuer. Get rid of the link, get rid of Aqua Racer, whatever they want to call it,
yeah,
get rid of everything that's on that 1 to 3,000 price point. Stick to the sport model, stick to the Carrera, and call it a day.
yeah, they should. I mean, they could rebrand themselves. It's like Seiko and Grand Seiko.
Yes.
Citizen, I think, is making the mistake of not doing that
Yep.
because Citizen has launched a higher end,
Mhm.
and those are fantastic watches, and it really everything there, as has always been the case with Citizen, point for point with Seiko, and they can they can run right next to them, but the marketing has never been the same. And so instead of doing Grand Citizen or some type of definite logo change that let you know that it was the next step up, it was still the same logo. And that's what killed Seiko, Grand Seiko for the longest time, is that they kept the Seiko logo and then just a small little GS lower down on the dial. It wasn't until they changed the logo and made a sharp division and separation that we saw Grand Seiko really start to take off.
And
So
you see boutiques in Miami and all around the world,
yeah,
and there's a reason why. Maybe then we need a tag store and a Heuer store and
yeah.
keep them far apart from each other as possible. I agree. I think that could work for them, but I'm not sure
The
who's
problem
running
is
it
they're
now.
yeah.
JP's
The problem
gone,
is
as
they're
far as I recall, so I don't know who's running the show there now. So
yeah. Well, yeah, the CEO, who knows? But they're
yeah,
still part of LVMH, so
yeah.
they're still at the mercy of whatever the shareholders decide is good business for
They're
them.
always going to be the ugly duckling, and so to speak, compared to
Yeah,
the rest of the crew. I think.
yeah.
Uh,
But
our
that's tough because I feel the same way. The Monaco I'd love to add, and the Octavia. Always loved the Octavia the way it looked,
yes,
but I just couldn't wear it. So
it's just one of those things. So it's called
yeah.
let's call watch snobbery, but that's okay. We like it that way. RJ, thank you for being so generous with your
Yeah,
time today, sharing your wisdom. I believe this was your third appearance already on The Chosen Life.
yeah,
We're in
yeah.
season number 2, and we look back forward to having you back soon again this year, my friend.
All right.
And you
We'll catch
recall
up
what as
then.
when we end off the episodes, we always do we pull out the flex. Let's see that even with the long sleeve,
It's yeah, long sleeves, who knows? It's
and we say keep living the chosen life.
living the chosen life. All right,
Thanks,
thanks, John.
thanks,
Talk
brother,
later.
for
Bye.
sure.